What do you do when you have such a painful experience in life and you don't know how to heal through it? Let me tell you, there is nothing more powerful than turning your pain into purpose. Hi, I'm Dr. Rhonda Simmons, and welcome to the Ignition Switch. And today I have the honor of interviewing someone, like I've said in so many other episodes. I have met people, some of the best people this side of heaven, and today is no exception. I'm super excited to introduce Miss Debbie Simmons, who is a nonprofit CEO. She's a legacy coach and trauma-informed leadership consultant who equips women and leaders to move from burnout to bold. She already has my attention because we're in the same line of work. And she also helps them move to sustainable impact. She is a mother of 9. Yes, you heard me correctly. You know the number after 8. She is the mother of 9 through adoption. Her legacy was born through the heartbreaking loss of her quadruplets, a journey that fuels her mission of resilience and purpose. As the founder of Anchor Point, a faith-based nonprofit serving thousands of families, and the Debbie Simmons LLC, she empowers high-capacity women to regulate stress, reclaim clarity, and lead with confidence. Debbie's signature BEST strategy, where BEST stands for breathe, evaluate, step back, and take action, offers a practical framework for building legacies that outlast the noise. I'm so excited. And before I bring her to the stage, let me just encourage you. You need to definitely like, comment, and share this video, this podcast episode. If you're listening on our podcast channel, it's important. Share this episode and make sure you subscribe so you'll know every time that I bring on another wonderful guest. And so without any further ado, I'm so excited to introduce to you Ms. Debbie Simmons. Hello, Debbie. How are you?
Hi, I'm excited to be with you guys today.
Yes, I am excited to have you. Oh my goodness. First and foremost, I am so sorry about the loss of your quadruplets.
Mhm.
I cannot imagine the grief that you have learned to live with. You
Mhm.
know, I refuse to say that you had, because every woman that I've ever met who's had a child and lost one, that child is never forgotten.
Mhm.
When they're asked, how many children do you have? They'll say what the number is and then say, and I lost a few. And so I am so sorry
Mhm.
about the loss of your quadruplets, but I am so honored to talk to you today about how you turned your pain into purpose and into power. And I'm just thrilled about that. And so can you share a pivotal moment in that journey that most shaped the leader that you are today in the midst of all that painful experience you went through?
Oh, yes, definitely. Okay, so my life is full of highs and lows, and I always tell people just buckle up because it's going to be a little bit of a journey. But I'm going to back up a little before that because I do think this is very interesting in when we think about identity. Okay, when I was a teenager, I had this overwhelming desire to be this young grandma because I didn't have grandparents because mine died very early in my life, and I just really wanted to make sure I could have my grandkids. So I was a girl, like a lot of your listeners, that can do anything. And so I knew I needed to find a guy, fall in love, get married, have children. Then I could be young grandma, right? And so in college, I set out to do that. I became an engineer too. So don't think I didn't get a degree, but I found a guy, fell in love, we got married, and then ran into infertility for years. Okay. And that really hit me on the identity piece because I could do anything. And here I am, I can't make my body work. And I remember very clearly laying down one day on a bed after I had not gotten pregnant and going, I really wish I was dead, because my body just wasn't working. And so I actually continued on. got pregnant. And as we got pregnant, we thought we were pregnant with twins. We were pregnant with quads. And here is the deal. We're facing, this is kind of the transition for me is I remember sitting in that hospital room going, okay, God, how do I get through this? I don't understand. And the number one question that we hold on to is why? And like, why is this, happening to me? And why am I losing my boys? And why? And so it was such a strategic question. And what God taught me in that question was God taught me that why is a stuck question. And I realized that it was stuck, meaning it's an internal question that, but you know what? When we're overcome and difficulties are coming our way, we just really, really, really want that why answer. And I can tell you that I clung to it because it's the only thing I had left. Right? And so when we're facing, I don't care when I'm a CEO, whatever, when I'm facing a hard thing, that why thing, I just want the answer to. And if I had the answer to it, it would make everything better. I could figure my way. Well, you know what I've learned is that this side of heaven, no matter what anybody said to me about my boys and gave me an answer, it would never satisfy. It wouldn't solve the pain. It wouldn't bring my boys back. It wouldn't get me out of my situation. And you know what I would have said after they told me their answer? I would have said, why? Right? Because it's never good enough. And so God really challenged me with a gentle whisper in my ear. He was like, give me your why. And I was like, no, I want it because it's all I got left. And he's like, give it to me. And so finally, I laid it down and I was like, well, what do I do after that? I don't know how to make my way through this. And he gently said, ask me a different question. So I'm like, what? I don't know what to ask. And he was like, ask me, how do I survive? And that for me was the beginning of healing because I figured out what my next best step was and I took it and he faithfully met me. And then I figured out my next best step and he faithfully met me. And on and on and on I go on my journey of 1,000 steps, And then as I began to heal, the question swapped. I was like, I'm doing pretty good. But I'm like, God, you didn't have me walk through this for no reason. And what is, like you say, you'll redeem stories. And so I want you to make something of this because I don't want to be stuck in the emotions. I want to feel again. I want to have joy. I want to laugh. I want to live. And so the question became, how do I thrive? So I go from surviving to how do I thrive? And in that place is when he began to open up all these doors of working with people who had lost children, leading grief groups, to adopting the 9 children, to starting at Anchor Point, to writing a book, to speaking, to being here with you today. And it all comes out of that pain. And so that's the pivotal moment of that question of why. And then how do I survive and how do I thrive? Those are the steps that really came out of that and kind of really are who I am and how I operate now. So that's kind of piece I learned. Now you didn't tell everybody, but I did become a young grandma eventually. So I do have 15 grandkids. So I did get that. It just didn't come the way I expected.
Oh my goodness. Wow. What a background story. Wow. And I was going to mention your book at the end, but since you
Yeah.
brought it up, I want to let people know, get the book, The Heart of Legacy. The website is on the screen. The website will also be in the show notes for those who will be listening to this podcast episode. And the QR code is also on the screen. Scan the code, get the book. You need to really read her book. It is so important.
And
I
it's
am
free and it's free to them. So it's a blessing to them. So don't let that hold you back if that's the issue.
Yes, yes,
Mhm.
wonderful. Well, I am telling you, what a tremendous testimony that you have, Debbie. You know, I we have so many things in common, but I'm not going to go into our commonalities yet because I want to hear more about you and what you're doing. And you adopted 9 children. That is amazing. So, what did that process teach you about sustainable leadership? Now that you are the mother of 9, the young grandmother of 15, what did all that teach you about sustainable leadership?
Mm. Well, first of all, I had gotten before we adopted, I had gotten my second master's in organizational management, and I didn't realize how helpful that was going to be.
Mhm.
But when we adopted, it was actually three different adoptions and three different sibling groups. And so when you talk about blended, we are blended, 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 and blended some more. But I think when we had a decision to make as to whether we would try and have children again or whether we would consider adoption. And so we went through this whole process of you know, could I love someone's child that wasn't my own blood? And then I thought about that and I was like, I love my husband and he ain't my blood. So God's got to work that out somehow. And what I found is when you bring any children, biological, adopted, it doesn't matter, but adopted children in particular with trauma backgrounds like my children have, um, they have a lot of maladaptive behaviors that we have to learn how to reprogram the brain and help them figure out their ways so that they don't act with trauma responses all the time. Well, I did find out that if I am not extremely healthy as the adult in the situation, I will easily get triggered because I see it as a personal attack when it's not that. Okay. And so I, God gave me 9 because he must have thought I needed to work on me a lot. And so what I find is that, and this works for leadership also, okay? And it works with my staff and everything like that, is that you know, people are going to do and say things and treat you certain ways. And this goes for my children. And a lot of them can feel very personal at the time. But what I learned with my children is that I learned that I wanted to be fully present and I wanted to have eyes of compassion. And so to do that, there needed to be a lot of healing in me. So what I realized is anytime that my children were able to find a button to push in me, that I needed to go work on my button so that my button didn't exist anymore. Right. Okay. And then I could be fully present. And when I could be fully present, what I could do is I could see the value of this child or my employee or whoever I'm dealing with. And I could go, I hear you. And the words you're using, what you're really saying is, Mom, I need you now more than ever, but I don't know how to tell you. And they may be cussing, they may be doing whatever, but if I can see them and I can hear those words, then my eyes of compassion and my heart of compassion and comes out and says, okay, they must be really hurting to be behaving this poorly, right? And so I pray differently, I think differently, I handle them differently. And really all it truly is really the heart of Christ. It's the way he comes to me, right? He doesn't come to me and go, you know what? Quit whining and complaining, get your act together, and then you can hang out with me, or go do time out first, whatever. He comes across and he puts his arm around me and he goes, I love you and I love spending time with you. And you got a mess right there in the middle of the floor. And we're gonna tackle that mess together. And I go, thank you, and show me the way. And so it gives us a chance to really see the world the way God sees the world. And that is really the biggest gift that my children have given me is the willingness to deal with my junk and to learn to be fully present. And that has been invaluable as a CEO in working with clients and teaching my staff how to work with clients. We had a situation the other day in our maternity home where one of the staff said something very sharp to one of our clients. And I was like, when I heard the story later, I was like, oh, she was triggered. She can't do that. And so we've got to help her work on her stuff so that she can be better prepared to deal with the clients from that perspective. And it's all there's a lot of grace there and there's a lot of growth to be had. But that is the biggest gift that my children have given me in my growth and my development. And that's affected everything as I've gone through and built organizations and things like that. So,
That is wonderful.
mhm.
So, Debbie, leaders often believe burnout is simply a sign that they're doing too much. But from your perspective, how does disregarding our nervous system in decision making actually sabotaging our growth and scalability?
Mhm. Yeah, so I would tell you that kind of builds on these things that my kids have taught me, right? Is when we are dysregulated, okay, and that means a button has been pushed, right? Then what my next behavior is going to be poor because it's going to come out of an emotional place, and if I can begin to learn to realize when my body is getting set off, it is extremely powerful. So when I'm teaching adults and what I teach my staff, I'm like, look, when your body starts to light up, you've entered what we call your shark waters. Okay. And it's like Jaws. It's like dun 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 dun. And you feel
Yes,
like you are going to die if you don't get this under control. And when that's the case, you got to like control everything, right? And so you clamp down on the child or you make a rash statement or you do all these things. And so, what I love to train people to do is to realize that there are things that we get lit up over. It's not an issue. It just is a thing that we have to deal with. And it happens to all of us. And we all have our histories. We're all bringing our histories to all our conversations with people, right? And so it just means we got some work to do on us after we figure our way out of this situation. And God wants to heal those places, right? And He wants to make us into the better leaders. But what I like to teach people is when you are entering into your shark waters, your body tells you first. Okay. So if we can learn to identify where this begins to show up, then we can say, oh, I've entered my shark waters, and that keeps me in my prefrontal cortex. Okay. Extremely powerful. For me, it shows up in my chest. My body starts to get tight and my chest gets real tight, and I'm just like, "Ugh." And as soon as I start to feel that, I'm like, I've gone into my shark waters. And that will stop me from drifting down to the amygdala really quickly, where I'm going to have an emotional response, right? And it says, oh, okay, that's my shark waters. No big deal. We can handle this. And, so it's this internal conversation that you're having with yourself, but it's extremely powerful to begin to realize that. I have the same thing happen when I'm dealing with a serious staff situation, or I got an employee lawsuit. That made my chest tight, right? And so I think that that is some of the most powerful things that we can actually learn. Okay. The other thing in regards to burnout, um, I think it's interesting because if you look at the life of Paul, or you look at the life of Jesus, they did pull away for some downtime and stuff, but their lives got more intense and more was required as they went through their lives. And I'm going, okay, God, if you've given me this and you want me to do this and you want me to do this, how do I figure my way in this? And we have to get really good at n- not, we get good at no, but what we don't get really good at is deciding between best and better, and learning to do that. And that's the harder decisions, right? And so I think as we get busier, we have to be willing to kind of really look really closely at how we're doing our time. And, I didn't really want to jump on the AI bandwagon, but I'm like, can someone simplify my email? So that this is a lot easier. And you can't, I can do it without having to get additional staff or, so AI tools that can save me time. Um, we have to look because God doesn't necessarily release the busyness. He didn't like, I mean, once there's 9 kids in my house, it's not like there's not going to be 9 every day. And, I'm like, they're still there because I remember this was so funny. I remember clearly when God planted this idea about starting the ministry. Okay. I was of starting Anchor Point. I was working full time in ministry. Okay. I ran 4 states of prison ministry for Prison Fellowship for Chuck Colson's organization. So I was busy. I had 7 kids. And God says, I want you to start Anchor Point. And my first reaction was, no. I've got a 24/7 mission field. I work in missions all day. I go home and I got a mission field that lives there all the time. And I'm like going, no, go find someone else. And we went for 2 years roundabout about that. And eventually he took my job away so that I could do it. I was like, yeah, okay, I got it. But for us, that's important for us to learn those things, right? So those are the big things for trying to figure out how to manage burnout, and knowing what our bodies are doing from that perspective.
Wow. While you were talking about how the burnout shows up in our bodies first, it reminded me of that book. You probably read it, The Body Keeps the Score.
Yes. Hmm.
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
And so again, I have so many stories I could share with you. That's really the reason why I retired as a school principal,
Hmm.
because the burnout was affecting me
Hmm.
physically,
Yeah.
and I'd rather go ahead and retire and enjoy life than to be viewed. I'd rather
Hmm.
nice to see you versus being viewed. I wanted to
Yeah.
make sure that I was still here. And I did what the Lord led me to do, and no regrets at all.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
And
I
I do think that's important. The body keeps a score because I can tell you that every year around April 1st when my boys are born, I can tell you maybe the week before I get a little grumpy and I'm like, why am I grumpy? And I'm like, oh, it's April 1st. My body knows, right? And then I think the other interesting thing is about 4 years ago, and this gets to kind of just health in general. I shut a truck door on my leg. Okay. And when I shut that truck door on my leg, it dug about an inch gash down into my leg. Long story short is the wound doctor couldn't heal it. It got infected. They wanted to put me in the hospital. I finally got a nutritionist that could help me get that wound healed. It was a 9-month process. Okay. Staph infection. I still fight staph periodically, even today, 4 years later. But the big deal is once I got that leg closed, the comment that I made to the nutritionist was, you know, there's probably something for me to learn here about my body. And the reason my body could not heal was because there was so much stress in my life, external, internal. I wasn't eating well. I lived on cokes and ran 100 miles an hour, and all those types of things. And it required me to begin to go, oh, I need to start fixing some of those things I didn't know I needed to fix because after I got it healed, I looked at the doctor and I was like, dude, there must be something I got to learn. And that means, hey, I can't drink Cokes all the time. What's
right.
some substitutes for that? So I do think if we want to be impact players, legacy makers, we have to do the things that are not going to allow us to be viewed, but to be present. And it's been 4 years of work for me, to do that things. Not and some of them aren't radical, but some of them I just don't know. I didn't know like what oil I was cooking with was making a difference, or, what if I used the artificial sweeteners, how they were hurting me. And so I just began to learn those things and help my body help itself. But my body was telling me, hey, I'm going to keep your heart alive and I'm going to keep you breathing. But if you lose your leg, it's okay. And I'm going, okay, I don't want to be like that. you know, and fortunately, I still have my leg, but it's been a lot of hard work to go, okay, I need to take care of me, which is what you were saying when you left, your position. I need to take care of me so that I can still be the young grandma, the impact player, do the ministry, do all these things that he's calling me to do because he hasn't slowed my schedule. Then I have to make that better decision of health and looking at all these things that affect my ability to perform and to be the best that I can be.
Absolutely. Debbie, I- before I was a principal, I was an English language arts teacher. And so you keep throwing out these superlatives of better and best, and so I'm excited because I know that you have a strategy called the BEST strategy,
Mhm,
which I
mhm.
just think is so ironic. But it's actually an acronym. So can you walk us through how leaders can use your BEST strategy in real time when stress or decision fatigue sets in?
Yes, I would be glad to. And I tried to make it simple. So best was just 4 letters. And I figured if I can remember it, people can remember it, right? But the first step of best is, and I find this applies anywhere with my children, with my spouse, everywhere. And I apply it all the time. So the best strategy, the B, is simply to breathe. Okay. There's a couple of things we know. If you are breathing, you are here. Okay. That's a good sign. But I'm not talking about just a shallow breath. I'm talking about like 4 by 4 breathing, deep breathing that fills your diaphragm. So, breathe in through the nose, hold it for 4, and then breathe out, hold it for 4. And to do that at least 3 times. And the reason we do that is because that deep breathing that we do actually helps us regulate our bodies, but it also flips us to our prefrontal cortex. So, usually, if we're getting stressed, anything's going on, then we need to make sure we stay up in that logical part of our brain from that perspective. And so, the first step's really easy. I just need you to breathe. Breathe for me. And any dysregulated kid, I will get down on my knees and get in their kind of face. And I'm like, I need you to breathe with us. And they'll breathe with me. And I'm like, okay, all right, now give me your words. Okay. So that's the first step. Then what we need to know is a lot of times you and I spend a lot of time like thinking about things and we get all worked up in the head and we feel overwhelmed and stressed. And so here's what I need you to do is I need you to evaluate. And so here's how we're going to evaluate. It's very simple. Okay. I want you to just dump all your thoughts in a voice recording or on a piece of paper, type it in the computer. Just get everything in your head out. Okay. So I will tell you, I was with one of my friends the other day and I kind of coach him and he was overwhelmed by some stuff. And I was like, okay, let's get it out of your head. And so we started, I'm like, surely there's like 10 or 15 things here, right? Because he's like so worked up. And I'm like, okay, so we start listing them out, and he ended up listing 2 things. And I was like, okay, well, let's make a plan now. But what we wanna do is we wanna get it out because all we let it roll around in our head, and so it starts taking up space, and then questions start coming in there, and it just overwhelms us. So, the second step is E, is evaluate. Dump it on the paper. Okay, we're going to come back and evaluate it, but dump it on the paper. Just get it out. And then I want you to step back. So that's the S. Step back and go do something else. Go read a book, go get a Starbucks coffee, go walk around the block. I don't care. Do something that gets your mind off it because now you've dumped it out and it's like, oh, I got it all written down. It's safe. We're not going to lose it. Go do something else. A walk, some form of exercise is usually really good. So like walking isn't particularly good because your body thinks differently when it's using all your body parts. Okay. And so that actually helps some. But after we've been away from it, it could be 10 minutes, could be all night, whatever it is, you're going to come back to it. Okay. When you come back to it, you're going to finish your evaluation. You're going to look at it and you're going to be able to see these are just emotions that are kind of running around in me, and I might need to do some healing work or whatever. This is like the fact. This is the issue. This is this. You'll be able to kind of spread everything out because you'll bring a whole new, fresh perspective to it. Okay. And then what we're going to do is our T is take action. And what you're going to do is you're going to figure out for you, you can get outsiders to give you kind of comments. You can do it yourself. You can pray about it. You're going to figure out for you what the next best step is. Okay. And for all of us, those are going to be very, very different things. Okay. When after I'd lost the boys, um, you know, my next best step on certain days was to pull the covers off of my head, to get out of the bed, brush my teeth, and walk around 5 minutes and then get back in the bed. Okay. So it wasn't some big next best step. It was just some positive motion forward. Okay. And each of us needs to be committed to do our next best step. So, who do we have in our lives that can lovingly kind of push on us and make us stay accountable to doing those steps? And then what do? We figure out the next best step. And this was my journey to healing. This is my journey through any situation. So I'll tell you, as a CEO, I mentioned earlier that I was blessed with an employee lawsuit, and my first question was why, right? Okay. But I mean, literally, I just stopped, I breathed, and I'm like, okay, I got to dump this out and figure out, what I'm angry about and figure these things out. But I'm like, what's the next best thing I can do? Because this isn't the why question is going to be a total derail. And I'm like, I got to figure my way. And my next thought was, you know what? I probably ought to call the attorney. That's probably a pretty good next best step in the situation of a lawsuit. And what we have to realize, and this is why it's so valuable, it's not, it gets you positive movement forward, but it also, as leaders, whether we're parents or CEOs or whatever we are, everybody watches how we walk through difficulties and trials and things like that. And they are learning based on what we do. And so, as I'm walking through that employee lawsuit, one, I want the ministry to survive, right? And I want us to ultimately thrive through it. But I also want my leaders and my team to know, how do you handle it when difficulty comes your way? We could totally lose it, or we could figure out our next best step. So they routinely hear that from me when they come into my office. I'm like, we're going to figure it out. And they're like, how are we going to figure it out? I said, I don't know, but we're going to do the next best step. And then, so that is the best strategy, is to breathe, to evaluate, get it out of your head, to step back and take a break. Those are pretty, 1 and 3 are pretty easy. And then 4 is to take action, because our biggest challenge is getting it out of the head is actually then the movement forward. So life is a journey, and it's not that we're not going to make a step backwards, but as I walked through healing, I made more steps forward than I went backwards, right? And then I committed to continue moving forward. And that's what life is about, for me. And so that's how I use the best strategy.
Wow. You have such an amazing approach to life and to circumstances that so many of us need to hear, especially in leadership. Because if you're a type A driver, and I don't know too many people in our roles who aren't,
Yeah.
sometimes even if we weren't born that way, just
Mhm.
it's the nature of the game, so to speak. If we're going to lead, we're the ones that have to make the tough decisions, to have those critical conversations. And so we have to be stronger and tougher, if I can put it that way, in a lot of areas so that we can continue mission and do what God has called us to do. But as a leader, you often speak about building legacies that outlast the noise. What does
Mhm.
that look like in practical terms for women leading in today's high pressure environments?
Yeah. So let me tell you where this idea of legacy just cemented itself in me. Okay. Is uh, when I held my boys and rocked them as they breathed their last and drifted off into eternity, like the whole world kind of just stopped. And I was like, it's not just about here and now. Eternity matters. It matters. And so for me, for as a leader, one of the things that I always want to be is I want to be very strategic and focused on making sure that the things that I am doing are leading to legacy that outlives me. Okay. Because the fact of the matter is you and I are all creating a legacy. Okay. We're going to leave something at the end. Okay. And the question is whether or not you and I will be intentional about what we do. And so I think there's a couple of things in there that kind of really play out is first of all, is how I make choices and, like helping in a grief group, adopting children. These are all very strategic things. Now, were they part of my heartstrings? Sure. But like building the ministry. Yeah, once I got on board with God and submitted, that was very strategic. And when we started that, I went to a friend and I said, do you want to build something that outlives us? And, she was like, "Yeah, that'll be great." I said, "You do know this is gonna be hard, right?" She was like, "Yeah." I'm like, not sure you're thinking counting the cost of all this." But, how and same thing happened when we adopted the 2nd and 3rd time. We sat down with our kids and we said, you know, "We feel like this is what God's calling us to do. How do you feel about it? And what's the cost that we're going to have to pay?" So, very strategic about my time and about what I invest my energy in. And is it building kingdom impact that can outlive us? And so I think for all of us, it's being the biggest deal is being intentional about what we do now. So, what I like to tell people is live your legacy now so that you leave it later. Okay. So only if we are living it right now, making impact, being intentional, doing all those things, teaching people that are coming behind us, will we leave the kind of legacy we want to leave. If not, we'll drift through life and we'll leave something, but it won't. I'm just going, okay, won't it be cool that I'll be in heaven and people are still falling in love with Jesus because they come to the ministry and I'm watching and I'm going, oh, girl, that's good. And I'm like, that's so exciting to think that it can have a ripple effect way, way past when I am no longer here. And that, I think that makes our daddy God smile. And that's what I want to be about.
Oh my goodness. I tell you, if you haven't gotten her book yet, I'm giving you another opportunity right on the screen. Scan the QR code, go to the website, get The Heart of Legacy. It's absolutely free. Debbie, I am so overwhelmed with how God has connected us, because I am super particular about who I interview for the show. Not every applicant gets approved to be on the show for whatever reason. I know there are lots of great people out there, but I'm always looking for the connections. You know, why is this person a good fit? And you are using so much of the same language that I use in my nonprofit when I'm talking with the board, when I'm talking with other people about building a legacy to outlive us. Those exact words. Our fertility story, very similar. The biggest difference is I didn't lose any babies along the way, but I am familiar with that pain that you started out talking about, how your body is not cooperating.
Mhm.
I'm familiar with that. And most of all, I love how you've taken the pain, turned it into power, purpose, and a plan. One of the things that God has been dealing with me all year about is systems, strategies, and sustainability.
Mhm.
And you epitomize all three.
Mhm.
And I can only imagine how organized your home is. Maybe a little noisy at times, but definitely the happy kind of noise that only comes with children and grandchildren and just being around
Mhm.
people that you love. And so as we wrap up this interview today, Debbie, that I'm just so honored that you've been here on the show. One question.
Mhm.
We talk about legacy because we're thinking forward, we're thinking future. I like to use the phrase "dear future me." We talk about the future, but in this moment, if you had to write a letter to your younger self, what would you say?
Mhm. I would say to my younger self is that don't take my life so seriously and fall in love with Jesus sooner and do what he says the first time. Because as I have become more and more humble and more submissive to what God's called me to do, it helps me realize I am living my best life. And I want to make sure that the people that are in my life know they are deeply loved and they're deeply valued and they have great worth and great impact. And so I think being that younger person that's not like quite so driven, and being very focused on being intentional. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Well, thank you so much, Debbie, for being on the show today. It has been exciting, exhilarating. So many things are going through my head right now, and I'm excited about all the work that you do in the ministry as well as your nonprofit organization. Thank you for the sacrifices because
Mhm.
leadership is sacrifice.
Mhm.
We know that, right?
Yeah, for
It
sure.
is
Yeah.
sacrifice. And
Mhm.
thank you so much. And I'm so glad that you have such a great support system to keep you going during the rough days. And I'm so glad that you were able to share your story with us. And so if you will just hang out just for a minute while I wrap up the show, that would be great.
Good to be in with you guys.
Yes, thank you so much. Oh my goodness. I told you at the very beginning that I have met some of the best people this side of heaven, and today was no different. What a powerful story Debbie has. Being in ministry myself, I am so acutely aware of the fact that you don't know people's stories. You don't know the backstory of the person sitting next to you on the pew. You don't know what has shaped their lives to the point of making them who they are today. And Debbie comes across so unassuming and so kind and warm and loving. But all of that was birthed out of such a painful experience of losing her quadruplets. Oh my goodness, 4 times the pain all at one time. I cannot even imagine. But the grace of God equipped her with everything that she needed to turn that pain into purpose and power. One of my biggest takeaways from this conversation is that your why keeps you stuck. Make sure you play this episode again, because Debbie talked about that a lot. Because how many times have you gotten caught in the loop of why me? Why am I going through this? Oh my goodness. And it is a vicious cycle. It keeps you stuck. But we've got to make sure that we are going through the process, that best process of breathing, evaluating, stepping back, and taking action. All 4 parts of Debbie's strategy are so essential to our success and to our legacy. So until the next time, be blessed, be encouraged, stay aligned, stay faithful, but most of all, stay on fire with your purpose. And I'll see you next time.